Happy Monday, DawgNation. Hope you had a great weekend. Thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. A lot of recruiting on today's show. John Stinchcomb stopping by. There is talk of possible playoff expansion. We'll have more details on a story that we spoke on Friday involving Dan Lanning, his possible candidacy to become Kansas head coach. So we're going to do a lot of stuff here over the course of the next few minutes. Glad to have you with us for DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
It seems hard to believe, even for someone like me who's got kind of a natural, I don't know, I must have had like ancient ancestors who were carnival barkers or something like that. I've kind of always just enjoyed hype. I just like it. I like pro wrestling. I like, things along those lines. I just like kind of building stuff up. I like hyperbole a little bit sometimes. And so you might be tempted to think, well, this is just BA being BA. But as hard as it is to believe, there's really a chance this 2022 class for Georgia ends up being as good as, if not better than, anything that Kirby Smart has done from a recruiting standpoint since his time of becoming a UGA coach in his first class back in 2016, and everything came after that. Now, I say that knowing full well the success that Georgia's enjoyed. Number 3 in 2017, number 1 in 2018, 2019, 2020, right there at the very top of the country over and over and over again. It seems like that Georgia is just dominating the recruiting landscape of this country, but truly, it may end up being unrivaled by what happens here in the 2022 cycle. The Dogs, if you care about this kind of thing this early in the process, are currently number 1 in the 24/7 Sports Composite team ranking. A lot of that based on kind of they like to re-rank and retabulate some of these figures and things along those lines. But nonetheless, for now, Georgia is number 1. And there could be more on the way. We've talked in recent shows about what Kamari Wilson, the 5-star safety, has said about the Dogs. Obviously, there's a lot of interest being paid to, all kinds of names. And then there's Branson Robinson, 4-star running back. Now, Georgia already got a back in the fold for the class of 2022 in Jordan James. Good-looking prospect in his own right out of the state of Tennessee. But Robinson's one of those guys that, boy, it just really seems like he ought to be a Georgia running back based on the way that he looks, and he's drawn some comparisons to other guys there as well. Well, our friends over at Rivals.com caught up with Robinson recently. They put this out there on Twitter. I'll make sure I put a link to the full video when I post the show later on through world-famous DawgNation.com. But I want you to hear more evidence of why this 2022 class for Georgia may be really coming together in a pretty staggering fashion. First of all, Branson Robinson here, the very good running back, speaking to Rivals.com, does not really mince words, but the idea that Georgia is his leader. And let me say one thing before we play this audio. And this is just kind of quick. So I had some issues with my equipment at home this morning. So some of this audio today is probably not as pristine of the quality that we normally get because I had equipment issues, which we'll try to get through here. But I do want you to hear Branson Robinson with Rivals.com calling Georgia his leader in his recruitment right now. This is good stuff.
Oh, man, just the way they produce and develop their running backs, get them to the NFL, So I'm going into a great situation if I decide to go there, So I have plenty of time. I have plenty, opportunities to, prove myself and play early. So that's right. That's really why they're number 1 right now.
Plenty of time to come in there and play early. Georgia's shown that it'll do that with running backs. He says he'd be going into a great situation. They put guys in the NFL, so therefore Branson Robinson to Rivals.com feels comfortable calling UGA his leader at the moment. And then the interviewer asked Robinson, what do you think about these comparisons you get to Nick Chubb? And there was this moment the other day where Robinson's doing the deadlift and he's setting records doing that, and just his overall general physique. It certainly looks a lot like what Nick Chubb would have brought to the table when he was a unbelievable athletic specimen in his high school time leading into his arrival there at UGA. Robinson's drawn some of those same comparisons. Branson says to Rivals that he's heard those, and he's got no problem being compared to Nick Chubb. And if you're a aspiring running back, why would you not, given the success that Chubb's having the Cleveland Browns? More here from Branson Robinson talking about his comfort with being compared to Nick Chubb.
I think it's pretty decent, yes. I think me and him have a lot of similarities, obviously the size, it's the running style. So, yeah, I can see why they can compare him to Nick Chubb.
So unfortunately, only probably a C+ level in terms of audio quality, but A+ level in terms of the kinds of things you want to hear a young man like that say. Feeling very good about the situation at Georgia is Branson Robinson. I can promise you that UGA fans feel very good about that there as well. It's going to be a really fun summer with all this kind of stuff. We've just said this, a lot as spring practice comes to a close, and as you sort of look at what's next, you got visits dominating the month of June. You got big guys like Kamari Wilson and Branson Robinson just really very open about their feelings about UGA right now. I just think that Georgia is in a great spot, and I'm entertained by it. I'm obviously eager to see how it all comes together here, but all of this seems really good for the moment. Let me now kind of shift gears and do something slightly different, but at least kind of within, contained within the same theme. Sometimes I kind of think about, why is it that sports are as popular as they are? Why is it we kind of allow ourselves to have so much of our free time away from work, things like that, consumed by sports? And why is it that, many of us, most of us, I would say, want our kids to kind of be involved in sports in some form or fashion? Like, why is it that we make in our society sports such a big deal? And the one thing I just kind of keep coming back to is it just sort of seems like, and this is not new ground here, I'm not breaking new, information by telling you this. Most of you are aware of this in some form or fashion yourselves, that sports just seems to be really good at teaching lessons that would be hard to be taught other ways. That sports just has a way of reminding of us what matters and reminding us just kind of how to be better at life or whatever it is that we're trying to get done here. And with that in mind, so I saw this, I think Clay Travis shared this on Twitter. There's a guy named James Light who's had a bunch of this really good video clips from some of these coaches conventions that a lot of these high school coaches are involved with. And Nick Saban, we've played a couple of those for you before. Here's another one from Saban where he was talking about his time being Miami Dolphins head coach. And he was talking about, kind of all the pre-draft reports that you read, the weeks and weeks and weeks you spend getting ready for an NFL draft and all the studying you're doing on the prospects that you could potentially be drafting, Saban referring to his time as Dolphins head coach there in 2005 and 2006. And Saban says that after looking at all these pre-draft reports, there was something that to him just became obvious in examining all this information. And he says the takeaway from that, he has been trying to instill in his Alabama players ever since then. Now, I know that Saban's kind of a Georgia rival here and kind of a nemesis to the program, but just going to put that aside for a moment and listen to a guy that has been around the block one or two times when it comes to football. And then after that, we'll kind of tie this back to Georgia a little bit there as well. This is Nick Saban on what he has learned from reading those pre-draft reports.
And I tell our players all the time, the two most compelling words in the draft report is and but. All right, so they read the player, and I'll take a defensive back. All right, he's got quick feet, change of direction, he got good long speed, can play man-to-man, he's a good tackler, he's got toughness, got really good ball judgment and really good ball skills, and he's a good person. He was a leader on the team. He graduated from school. Coaches loved him. Read the same player, but he had a positive drug test. He had a domestic violence incident with his girlfriend. Got in a fight in a bar when he was a freshman. Strength coach said he wouldn't piss on him if he was on fire. Who do you want on your team? And or but? All right, so what I tell players is you don't realize that as soon as you apply for a job, as soon as you put your name in for the draft, people are looking for reasons not to pick you. They're looking for reasons not to hire you. So don't give anybody a reason to say but.
I mean, I just think that's incredible advice because Saban is right that when we make decisions in life, we're not choosing something as much as we're like eliminating the other alternatives. And that's true when you can only draft one player or you're trying to decide, hey, which guy do I spend more time recruiting, this guy or that guy? That you're not looking to make the choice. You're looking to eliminate the other options. And the buts, as Saban calls, he's a good player, but this, but that, but the other, is one of those reasons you might end up not doing that. And I know that, like, especially sometimes with like younger people in the audience, you may be cynical about this and say, yeah, but Saban's taking chances on maybe guys of questionable character before. He doesn't really mean what he's saying. But I sort of get the sense that football really is evolving in such a way that when you do have a chance to choose higher character guy over the other, it does seem like a lot of coaches are moving that direction. It certainly seems like Georgia in recent years has been kind of moving in that direction, because when Kirby Smart spoke about this a couple of years ago, when it comes to the kinds of players he wants in his own roster, not using the language of the ands and the buts, but kind of using the same theme that Saban talked about there of, hey, what the guy has going on beyond his ability to play the game. Smart says, yes, that definitely matters to what we're trying to get done here. This is Kirby Smart from, I think this is February of 2020. This is Kirby Smart.
More every year, more each and every year. Like, it should never be the only thing, but it's definitely the most important thing. And the older I get, the more wiser I get, and the more you realize that chasing guys that don't believe in the same principles and values of your university and of your program, they're just not worth it. I mean, there's too much time spent on guys that if you're having to chase them around, it's just not worth it. I mean, take the guys that want to be there, you go play with the guys that want to be there, and number one, you'll enjoy your job day to day, your staff will enjoy it more, but so will the other players. So it's very important to us.
I mean, I know the audio quality on that's pretty mediocre, but hopefully you're able to get the message that Smart's trying to send. And for those of you who have maybe a tendency to want to be cynical on a topic like this, I hope Smart's honesty you can appreciate. He says, listen, character's not the only thing we're thinking about. I mean, we're still thinking about, who has the physical attributes and just the overall ability level to play at the, kind of the highest caliber of the sport in the SEC. But within that category, hey, if we're having to deal with a bunch of character stuff off the field, then it's just not going to be worth the trouble. And I think that's really true. In a lot of ways, I think this is really the secret sauce right now of UGA recruiting. I mentioned off the top of the program that the 2022 class has a chance to be the best that Georgia signed. And here's what programs like Georgia and Alabama and the other sort of top recruiting programs are able to do right now. They have established such a strong recruiting message that they now get to be very selective about who they bring in. So these programs, and fortunately right now Georgia's one of them, they're only picking from the highest of the high in terms of, capable prospects. And within that group, they now get to be selective. It's not just we need guys who can play at the SEC level, so therefore we'll roll the dice on a character issue. No, it's like we're only choosing from guys who can play at the SEC level, so therefore let us also look for guys who have some of those and attributes that Saban talked about. Good player and good teammate. Good player and high character guy. Good player and, true leader. And listen, go back and listen to some of the recent UGA commits and see this for yourself. Like Malachi Starks is the guy that you would want on any team. I mean, he's, values family, values everything. I mean, the interview that DawgNation did with Starks after he committed, I mean, how could you not fall in love with him pretty quickly? So, to say nothing of Jalen Walker, who's kind of cut from that same cloth, and Gunnar Stockton, and on you want to go here in terms of these guys that Georgia's brought in who, I mean, it's just very I know you can fake stuff in interviews. I get that, but I'm going to assume that these aren't all, being faked here, that it seems to go beyond just being a good player. It seems to be, the kind of guy who feels like he's going to be a good teammate there as well. And I do think that kind of stuff matters. And I think the way in which that's kind of evolving in football is probably kind of a good thing. But specifically the way that it's evolving here at UGA, I think is a really good thing there as well. So the Saban words, I take them seriously. Smart echoing a similar theme a couple of years ago. I take that pretty seriously there as well. It seems to be the secret sauce working for Georgia right now. And it could be the recipe for a championship here sooner rather than later. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And good to have you with us no matter how. You get to us today live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, on the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Rev, and we're available as a podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just really glad to have you as a part of the program, and really appreciate our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia for making it all possible. Pella can really set you up with more energy-efficient, better-looking windows and doors. This is good for the outside curb appeal. It's good for the way your home feels on the inside. And Pella makes the process of picking all this out simpler, more enjoyable than ever before. You get a free, no-pressure consultation. You can do that in person. You can do that over the streaming video if you're still more comfortable doing that way. They'll go through product samples with you. They'll talk about installation options. They'll just make sure that you are fully equipped with all the information you need to make the best choice for you and your family. You can also take advantage of great savings right now now, 10% off your entire project, 0% APR for 24 months. Very easy to get in touch with. You can give them a call, 678-638-1496. That's 678-638-1496. Or as it says there on your screen for those of you watching on video, pellaofga.com/DawgNation. pellaofga.com/DawgNation. Please just do me a favor, and let them know that the folks over at DawgNation Daily sent you over there. I told them that they would take good care of you. I know they will, so I feel very comfortable saying that to you. All right, it's a very busy show for us. It's John Stinchcomb coming up in just a couple of minutes. Before we do that with John here today, though, let's go around the doghouse, and I want to follow up on a story that we spoke about yesterday, I should say the last time we did a show, which was on Friday, regarding Georgia defensive coordinator Dan Lanning, who Football Scoop has now mentioned as a possible candidate for the Kansas job. I did some digging on this over the weekend, looking kind of some of the media stuff coming out of Lawrence, Kansas, and it certainly does seem like that Lanning's on the list. In fact, one of the news reports I read said that Lanning is going to interview for this job. I told you that I like Football Scoop a lot. I think they do good work, but the story they wrote about Lanning from Friday, it wasn't abundantly clear to me from reading that Lanning was definitely going to interview for the job. But according to one of the media reports coming out, I think it was 24/7 Sports that had this coming out of Lawrence, that Lanning is expected to interview. But if you're a UGA fan who wants to keep Dan Lanning, and I believe that all of you should, I guess you'll take it as relatively good news that right now it seems like the top candidates for this job for Kansas from their perspective are current sitting head coach Lance Leopold out of Buffalo. He may be the leading candidate. I think Jeff Monken out of Army may be number 2 on that list. I think Monken has even kind of, sort of given out some overtures that he is interested in the job. A guy from Eastern Michigan, I guess, comes in next after that. So it seems like the names that are at the top of the list for the Kansas job right now are sitting head coaches. I'm assuming between the 3 guys that I just mentioned, it doesn't get much past that in terms of somebody being selected. The other coordinator you hear kind of commonly mentioned here is Mike Elko out of Texas A&M. But it seems like for now the prime focus of Kansas search is with those sitting head coaches, and whether it's a Leopold or a Monken, or for some reason I'm blanking on his name, the dude from Eastern Michigan. It seems like between those guys right now, they may be the primary guys. And as I said before, if you're a Georgia fan, keeping Lanning is something you definitely want to do. I thought the Pick 6 previews had an interesting stat. If you look at yards per play, and as they do it here, adjust it for opponents, obviously playing tougher teams in the SEC, Georgia, according to Pick 6 previews in 2020, was actually number 1 in the nation in the top 2020 defenses per play on an opponent-adjusted basis. Alabama came in number 2, Iowa was 3rd, Pittsburgh was 4, Northwestern was 5. Now, who knows? They're not exactly showing their work on a lot of this stuff. A lot of analytics folks are not. But it is an example, even with some kind of high-profile disappointments defensively against Alabama and Florida, probably primarily speaking here, Georgia, statistically speaking, did as well defensively a year ago as any team in the country. It's another example of why I think keeping Dan Lanning is something that Georgia fans ought to want to do. And right now, maybe that Kansas coaching search is at least heading in that direction, unless a whole bunch of guys kind of say no, so that's worth following right now. Before we get John Stinchcomb, let me also remind you that ongoing is our big promotion with our friends at Kroger, our Kroger 5-Star Moms. We want to honor the moms in our audience, and so many of you have kind of reached out to nominate somebody, whether it's your own mother, a mother that you know, your wife, just really anybody here on that. Really just explaining why this mother, as we head towards Mother's Day, has had such a profound influence on your life. And I just think that's really great stuff, and I'm really glad we get a chance to do this. Coming up on future editions of DawgNation Daily, we're actually going to be able to announce our Kroger 5-Star Moms, and it's a huge prize pack giveaway here. It includes a $50 Kroger gift card, a $50 Bath and Body Works gift card, a $50 Home Chef gift card. So these are really great giveaways for our Kroger 5-Star Moms. If you go to DawgNation.com, right there at the top of the page, you can find out more information about how you can get involved, or if you're just ready to make your nomination, the website, the email address to do that is info@DawgNation.com, info@DawgNation.com. You can find out a lot more about that there. So it's going to be great stuff. It's our Kroger 5-Star Moms promotion ongoing right now, DawgNation.com for more details. All right, it's always fun to have John Stinchcomb here on a Monday. So let's dive in. Let's get ready to talk some dogs with him. Glad to have him, you, everybody else with us here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
So I'll bring John Stinchcomb in on the conversation we were just having before he joined us. And, John, this is a little bit of a follow-up to something we talked about on Friday. Football Scoop had mentioned Dan Lanning's name as a potential candidate to be Kansas, head coach. And listen, we kind of did the on the one hand, on the other hand thing on Friday that, hey, it's a Power 5 head coaching job, but it's arguably the worst Power 5 head coaching job. So is this a job that Dan Lanning would even be interested in? You do kind of come to realize, okay, well, he's from Kansas City. He's coached that recruited that Kansas area before, going back to his time on the Arizona State staff prior to coming to UGA many years ago. So he's got some geographic ties to the area. But now you hear that, well, it's guys like Lance Leipold from Buffalo or maybe Jeff Monken from Army, sitting current head coaches who may be the top candidates for Kansas, at least right now. If that's true, I take that as a sigh of relief. I believe that Dan Lanning's going to be a head coach eventually, but I don't want eventually to be right now. So what do you make of the idea that Lanning is kind of showing up here as a potential head coaching candidate at Kansas now, and certainly future programs as they become available in the years to come?
Well, I think it's in the same vein as like a Sam Pittman back to Arkansas. It's always nice when you get to go home and coach in that area that you're so familiar with. But at the end of the day, Kansas is no destination for a coach that has lofty aspirations to be competitive. I mean,
right.
Let's be honest, the ceiling for them isn't close to what Coach Lanning is used to and what he's experiencing at Georgia, which I think is will be the deciding factor. I mean, once you're exposed to competing on a national level, and I think it'll also be an indication of his trust and aspirations for this season alone. If he decides to stay, just because I think there's a lot in front of this Georgia football team that you could be really excited about, that would far exceed the pros of going home, if you will, and getting paid more as a head coach. It's just not the best situation.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends who are high school coaches. I know you do as well. And obviously coaches like to give advice to younger people about how to get jobs. That's one of the things that kind of comes up with the people that I know a lot. But, John, one of the things I also hear quite frequently is high school coaches advising sort of younger people who want to get into that field, not just about how to get a job, but one of the things I commonly hear is be careful about the job that you take, because you can take some jobs that don't give you very many opportunities to take other jobs. And all of a sudden, you're kind of professionally stuck. And sometimes you get stuck at a very young age because, hey, not every job is a springboard to a better opportunity. And obviously at the college level, a place like Kansas could kind of be that of you get here and you really can't go anywhere but here. But, listen, if the money's right, then you never coach again. Maybe it's not so bad. So I guess it's a lot for Lanning to think about there.
Well, and why is he on this list? He's on the list because, one, he's a great coach. I don't want to discredit or misalign the credit that he is due. He's done a fabulous job being a recruiter, being an on-the-field coach, the way he schemes it up, the way he's developed talent. He's a great coach. But there are other great coaches that get lost on teams that are not very good. So winning is always the best recruiter. It's the best recruiter for players. It's also the best recruiter for your services as a coach. When you're connected with winning programs, everyone thinks that you're better than you probably are. I've been the beneficiary of it as a player when you think, wow, this guy, he's having a great year because of the team success. And that's you look at the individual awards at the end of the year, it usually comes for guys that are on more talented teams. Coaches are no different. They get to benefit from the success of the team. So I think there is going to be, and I feel very little concern that this wouldn't come to fruition. If Coach Lanning wants to be a head coach, there's going to be a number of opportunities in the future that would be much more appealing than trying to turn around a program that you'd have to be breaking some virgin ground for because they haven't found success Lord knows how long.
Well, let me just say one more thing on this topic, then we'll kind of talk about something different. I think one of the most underreported, under-discussed stories, and around Georgia, it's very hard to have anything that's under-discussed, just given the conversation that's kind of always ongoing from people who are passionate about Georgia football. But John, still don't think we've talked enough, but the fact that Georgia was able to prevent Dan Lanning from hopping over to Texas and taking the same job over there. Texas is the kind of program that's very resourced, and the fact that Georgia was able to kind of flex its muscle, hold on to Dan Lanning, I think is an underrated offseason story. I gave some stats a moment ago that tell kind of a successful story for Lanning last year. I know there were some high-profile, defensive letdowns in games that really mattered, like Alabama and Florida, and I get all of that, but I really believe that Lanning is a star in the making from a coaching standpoint, and in 2021 it's kind of hard to know how much defense even still really matters, just given the explosion of offense around the sport. But to the extent that it does matter, I think Lanning is more than capable of doing good things at UGA. So the fact that Georgia hasn't lost him yet to some other kind of job is the kind of thing, as a fan speaking personally, in my own opinion here, I'm just really glad that it seems like he may stay in place, or at least he has a good chance of staying in place here a little while longer, because I think he's a very valuable asset for UGA.
Couldn't agree more. I think he's a great coach. I think he has brought a lot to the program on the field and off. His ability to develop players, recruit players, and then scheme up great schemes on a Saturday has been to Georgia's advantage more often than it hasn't. So he certainly is an asset. And looking in hindsight, there's little comparison between the opportunities that exist as a head coach at Texas versus Kansas in football, at least. So to see, at the time we had to step up financially and make it make sense. But that seems like much more of a promising opportunity that was turned down from Coach Lanning than this one does. I think it's mainly because of the time of year. I mean, very rarely are we talking about in the middle of April a coaching opportunity, and would we possibly be losing one of our staff members that has become a prized asset? So that's probably why it's getting more buzz than it usually would.
I got more conversation with John Stinchcomb coming up. Before that, I want to remind you about my friends at secondchance.law. I love the service they provide for people who really need it. There are new laws in Georgia now that make it easier to get some old convictions restricted off your criminal history, which opens up opportunities for you, better jobs, in some cases better living opportunities, things along those lines. But the process can be confusing, hard to follow. That's what secondchance.law provides for you. It's an online quiz. By answering the questions, you can determine your eligibility. And if you're not eligible, then my friends at secondchance.law can help you figure out how to get eligible. This is a really great service for people who I think can really benefit from it. One of the partners, of course, as I've told you before, a double dog, two-time UGA graduate, former Redcoat, long-time listener of DawgNation Daily. So these are good dog people doing a great service in the kind of the law space with people who can really benefit from that. So secondchance.law is the website. Secondchance.law. Check it out right now to determine your eligibility and let them do some really good work for you there along those lines. John, before you joined us, I was playing some audio of Nick Saban from a coaches convention, and kind of ties into some things that Kirby Smart said in the past. And, for years and years and years, coaches have talked about, hey, we want good players, good character guys. That matters to us. But then sometimes you see the decisions that programs make, and you're left to wonder, well, do you really put your money where your mouth is when it comes to the kind of high-character guys you say you want to bring in the program? John, I sort of get the sense that's changing a little bit now, certainly at a place like Georgia, where it seems like they really are taking pretty big steps to show that character matters in terms of recruiting. Now, you've still got to have elite players. You've got to have guys who kind of surpass the athletic threshold, but within that population, it does seem like Georgia right now wants to be selective in terms of who it is bringing in, and being a part of the roster, good teammate, leadership, potential, things along those lines. As a guy who's played the game at the college and the pro level, a guy who was a leader for the teams he was a part of, how much do you think this should matter and actually currently does matter in the football landscape we're in right now?
Oh, it certainly matters, because football is still a team game, and the chemistry in a locker room very much will dictate your success in a season. Now, you have to have a high baseline of talent. You better believe it. And can you have tolerance for a few guys that are more at risk, if you will? Yes, but you're always playing that that estimation game of being an actuary of your roster and saying, we can't lose this locker room. We need guys that are high character and will create an identity and uphold the identity that we want in the program, or else that balance is lost. That's not an easy thing to recover from. You get too many guys with priorities other than what they should be, and it can sour a locker room very quickly, and that dictates and will determine your success more often than not. So I think character is a huge piece that you look at the most successful programs, and they've been able to weigh those decisions. They're able to maintain that balance and maintain an identity that's desired of your program. We want to be highly skilled athletes that work for each other and continue this development and put team first. And there is some tolerance for some players that may not identify in those categories early, but it's not going to be many because once it's the 10-10-80 rule. The average is 10 high flyers, 10 on the other end of the spectrum that may be leading in the other direction, and you're going to influence the 80 in the middle. You start messing with that ratio too much, and you've got problems on your hands. I think that's pretty easy to see the number of programs that have suffered from those decisions in the past, and always something that coaches keep in the forefront of their mind is, is this guy going to fit in what we're doing in the direction we want to go?
Let me finish one more topic before we let you go here today. There has been a report from ESPN.com citing a release from the College Football Playoff Committee that it seems like expansion could be in the future of the College Football Playoff. Not the next couple of years, doesn't sound like, but maybe prior to the current contract, which I think is set to expire in 2025. We could have this sooner rather than later. Whether it's a 16 playoff, an 18 playoff, I guess there's even an idea that it could be a 16-team playoff, although that seems admittedly like a remote possibility. What do you make of the idea of college football playoff expansion now that it seems like it's a more real topic than it's ever been before?
Well, I think it's a step in the right direction. I think the reason why we have bowl games is because of the dollars that are tied into them at this point. What we've seen is a devaluation of bowl games, and it's for players and coaches alike, where if you're not in the college football playoff, some players have already said their season is over, and they're walking away from their team and don't value the bowl game like it has been in the future. And we just need to recognize that. If that's what we've created and that's where we find ourselves, no time to cry over spilt milk and say, well, it shouldn't be the way it is. It is the way. And all we can do now is react to it. And if that means expanding the college football playoffs so that more players have that opportunity and they're not walking away, I think it would be a lot harder for guys to say, regular season's done, I'm done, despite the fact that the rest of my team is still practicing, if they're a part of an expanded playoff system. So I am very much an advocate of moving that direction. It makes me a little bit nauseous to think that guys are walking away from their team and teammates when the season's not over. So if an expanded college football playoff system helps reel that back in, I think that's a great step for college football in general.
John, great stuff. Thank you so much for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia today. I'll look forward to getting a chance to speak with you very soon. Always interesting insight, and we'll enjoy the chance to chat again very soon.
Hey, always a pleasure. Go Dogs.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
We'll talk more about that topic coming up here as we transition to our SEC Through. Of course, always great to have John Stinchcomb as a part of the program. Let me also remind you here very quick that my friends at Merriweather and Tharp are your source for Georgia divorce. Let's face it, in some cases that divorce situation is an unavoidable outcome in your life, and if that's true for you, the thing to do is to put yourself in the best position to go through it and to be made whole and better on the other side of all this. That's what I know my friends at Merriweather and Tharp can do for you. Your source for Georgia divorce. You can find them online, theatlantadivorceteam.com. They'll walk you through the process. They will provide you free resources, blog posts, podcasts, things along those lines, and they will be a tireless advocate on your side, working hard for you, fighting for you when necessary. It's the AtlantaDivorceTeam.com, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online today, my friends at Merriweather and Tharp. So the thing from ESPN cites is this college football playoff deal where they're talking about all the options they're considering and the fact that I think smart people have now kind of concluded that if they're putting this out there, all these options, and they're talking about this openly, unsolicited as they are, then it seems likely that playoff expansion will occur, and it could occur sooner than later, even with the current contract slated to run, I believe, through 2025. I think that's the number. This could happen sooner than that. I am in favor of playoff expansion. However, I have a very specific opinion about this. I think that when it comes to the number of teams in the playoff, 4 does not seem to be the right number. I would say that 8 feels like the right number, but to me, 6 would be worse than 4. So you give me all the playoff choices. Now, I'm going to push 16 aside for a month because I don't think that's real, and you're never going back to like a BCS deal where you only have 2. So of the realistic options, the current number of 4, possibly expanding to 6, or expanding to 8. I think I would rank them 8, then 4, and then the worst option to me is 6, and I'll kind of go through why. What you want is a debate for the playoff. What you want is a discussion about who's supposed to get in. And if you move to a 6 deal where it's basically like the 5 Power 5 conference champions plus the best group of 5, then actually you're making the race to the playoff towards the end of the season less interesting than it currently is right now. As it stands now on that championship Saturday, you're watching that Big 12 game to have some sort of comparison with what's happening in the Big 10 game or whatever else to see how these conference champions, these best teams from these various regions, how they perform against each other or how they perform against their opponent in comparison to each other. It's probably the best way to say that all the way around. If you move to 6 and it was just the most obvious 6, which is Power 5s plus the top group of 5, then you're actually doing even less of that. The reason why I like 8 is because on the one hand, I want to take power away from the committee. I think the committee's got too much power right now, and I think it makes for a maddening discussion because, frankly, from year to year, they don't behave consistently. It's one of the reasons why I always laugh at these analytics sites that try to give you odds to make the playoff. You're basically trying to put a numeric, equation behind what is at times an illogical human decision. It doesn't really make any sense to me, and I think we've all gotten really frustrated by that. We've also gotten really frustrated by the number of blowout games that exist in these national semifinals. We've had a number of those. Really, Georgia, the year it was in the playoff in 2017, the Rose Bowl game and then the close game against Alabama was obviously a disappointing loss, but those are at least 2 examples of close football games that Georgia played in. Both those games went to overtime. That's a pretty significant rarity in comparison to a lot of what else goes on with the college football playoff kind of all the way around there. So if you move to 8, not only are you reducing the power of the committee, you're going to give more conference champions a way to play their way in, taking the committee decision away from that. But you also have the opportunity for just better games, because here's what you're going to do. You're going to open the door for at least 2 at-large teams to be in the college football playoff. That would be a team like Georgia in 2018 or a team like Texas A&M in 2020. And here's what you do. When you put those at-large teams in, not teams who just make it by default because they have a conference championship or a 0 next to their name in the loss column, but teams who actually looked the part of what a best team in the country is supposed to be, eventually you'll get better games in the semifinals because those teams will work their way through the quarterfinal. They'll win a lot of those games, and they will get into a semifinal game, and you'll have what you had in 2017 with more competitive games taking place. I believe that's true. In fact, I'll go so far as to say this. This may seem ludicrous, but if you give me the choice of the 6 teams in an 8-team playoff that might make the playoff by virtue of winning their conference on one side of the ledger, and the 2 teams in a given year who might make the college football playoff because of an at-large status, teams that just look like they're one of the 8 best teams in the country. Over the course of a long haul, 10-year, 20-year span, that group of 2, those at-large teams that make the playoff, are going to win national championships a lot more frequently than you might think, especially in comparison to the other 6 conference champions who, really aren't always the best teams in the country. They just kind of, punch their ticket because they won a conference. But it may have been a weak conference. They may have come from a weak division. Not all conference champions year over year are created equally there. The other, I guess, quick point you got to, mention in all this is the role that the group of five does play in this. And this is one of those things that always kind of frustrates me about the college football media. Is the group of five is over-covered by the media. If you talk to a college fan at a tailgate or a sports bar, place where people are watching college football on a Saturday, no one's talking about Coastal Carolina. No one's talking about, I don't even know who the other teams even were in the discussion, Louisiana or even UCF. That's just not the thing the average fan kind of talks about. But the amount of media coverage about, hey, does Coastal Carolina belong in the college football playoff or does Cincinnati belong in the college football playoff? That is just so out of balance in comparison to the way that actual college football fans talk about this. But let's face it, for any kind of playoff expansion or to even get a playoff to begin with, you have to have the votes of the rest of college football to kind of move in that direction. And, it may be one of those things in an 18 playoff world or an expanded playoff world. You just sort of have to bite the bullet and provide more of an opportunity for the group of five, even though the average college football fan just doesn't care about that at all. The numbers bear it out year after year after year. You may have to make some sort of concession in this regard just to get the kind of votes you need to move forward with this for the sport. So bottom line on all this for me, ESPN's talking about it. Committee kind of puts it out there to begin with. Sooner rather than later, moving to a 6 or maybe an 18 playoff. I don't really think that 16 would get much consideration. I think playoff expansion is better than the current situation, but I think it needs to be 8 to really be good there. A couple more things here as part of our SEC through. Busy weekend for SEC spring games. I got some jokes on Twitter about the fact that I'd be talking about Texas A&M today. Some of the audience thinks that I do that too much. I was impressed with what I saw from Hayes King. I would say that right now the leader for that Texas A&M quarterback situation, and this matters. Georgia doesn't play A&M, but Alabama does. This may be a very topsy-turvy SEC West right now in the presence of a guy like King working in a Jimbo Fisher offense. If he does emerge there over Zach Calzada, that could be one of the bigger stories in the SEC right now. So I was, fairly impressed with A&M on Saturday. Obviously, Matt Corral looks like a big-time player there for Ole Miss as well. That was another one of those, spring games that occurred. You had first-year coaches like Heupel and Shane Beamer kind of going this weekend there as well. But I think the big story is what's happening there at quarterback in the SEC West, with Corral looking strong as ever for Ole Miss, King possibly emerging at A&M. Busy weekend of stuff related to all that. Two other quick stories. NFL Draft comes up on Thursday. There's obviously some reporting here this weekend about what's happening to the San Francisco 49ers at the number 3 overall pick. They've now kind of whittled it down, according to, I think it was Ian Rappaport who may have had this first, down to 2 guys, either Mac Jones, the former Alabama quarterback, or Trey Lance, the North Dakota State quarterback. The Lance thing just doesn't make any sense to me, but I've said that before. But if you're kind of curious what happens with either the Falcons at 4 or any of the other stuff in the SEC after that, San Francisco really holds a lot of the keys there with that number 3 overall pick after trading into that spot. We expected them to go quarterback, and now the reporting's out there that maybe the former Alabama guy, Mac Jones, may be the guy who lands there in that spot. So that'll be a story we're watching a bunch here this weekend. Also, quick women's basketball note. We don't do a ton of women's basketball in the SEC through, but it's a pretty big story. LSU has really flexed and made a big hire here. Kim Mulkey, a very successful coach at Baylor, is leaving Waco to go to Baton Rouge. So she's got ties to the state of Louisiana. So Kim Mulkey coming to LSU there. Pretty big story. We'll make that your SEC through. Also, let me very quickly give a shout-out to the Diamond Dogs going to Missouri. Lost game 1 on Friday, but came back to take both the Saturday and Sunday game, and Georgia has now won 3 consecutive SEC series. This is a team that's seemingly getting hot at the right time. Missouri is not a winning team, but on the road, needing to do what you had to do, Georgia kind of did that. So as you head towards that time of year, we're starting to think about NCAA regionals and things along those lines. Georgia making a pretty strong case for itself. Now even in SEC play, and boy, that's not an easy thing to do in a time when the SEC is as deep as it is, but Georgia's really putting together a pretty good season there under Coach Scott Strickland. Also, before we get ready to say goodbye today, let me also talk to you about my friends at 5 Market Realty. Speaking of Athens, obviously Diamond Dogs playing there at Foley Field, and the real estate around that ballpark, around the University of Georgia, is certainly a hot real estate market right now. So if you want to get involved in the investment market there, the game day condo situation, the Airbnb rental stuff, or if you just want to retire there, live there, whatever else. Local expert knowledge from my friends at 5 Market Realty make that easier for you. You can find them online, the number 5mrealty.com. That's 5mrealty.com. You can find them there. They know the scene around Athens. They can take good care of you and help really introduce you to all the things you need to understand to make the real estate buying process there in the Athens area work in your advantage. That's what 5 Market Realty does. They're also on the 2021 Bulldog 100 list. So when you do business with my friends at 5 Market Realty, you're doing business with good dog people. Check them out today. The number 5mrealty.com. And as we wrap up here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia today, let's do a Gator Hater roll call here and a golden shoe winner. Our buddy Bank6 sent this to me on Twitter. I think it's really funny. So here's what happens. Dan Mullen puts this out on Instagram. He says, where am I? He says, hint, not on campus. It's a picture of him on lake or open water there somewhere. And a Florida fan tweeted the picture of Mullen from Instagram saying, here's your second hint. You're also not out recruiting there as well. So in some cases, it's Florida fans themselves that get a little frustrated with Dan Mullen. It's not always Georgia fans who are mocking Mullen for his recruiting failures. Florida fans get pretty frustrated about that kind of stuff, too. Our buddy Bank6 sent that to us on Twitter. So good stuff all the way around from him. He gave you a hashtag golden shoe. And yes, indeed, you are golden shoe worthy here today. How about Gator Hater Countdown? 187 days from right now, Georgia gets some revenge on them lousy, stinking Gators. We'll see you tomorrow at DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down. Appreciate all of you being with us here today, and we are going to have to be a little quick with our comments, but we'll roll through and get as many as we can. As I do that, I'll remind you, R.S. Andrews will show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised for the price. It's promised air conditioning units. It's warm here so, as we head towards the summer, so make sure your system's ready to go for the warm weather that's on the way. Find them online, rsandrews.com. Or in Chile, on the subject of multiple playoff teams from the SECs, is in 2018, Georgia would have been in with 2. In 2017, Auburn would have been in with 3. Yeah, so you kind of expand that playoff. You do open the door for more SEC teams because the SEC is the deepest league. It would obviously be the league that would stand to benefit the most from this playoff expansion. And much the same way Alabama, as an at-large team, won the title in 2017, when you put these non-SEC champions in as at-large teams, they are going to be capable of making some noise. I do believe A&M could have made some noise if it was in the playoff a year ago. It would have made more competitive games. I would, put us in the same thing about Georgia in 2018. Some of these teams that are not quite conference champion, but clearly better than most of the rest of the country because they just play in a deeper conference, you give them more chances. I think they're going to reward that. Let's see what else. Jerry Popham says 8 teams are perfect because if your team is not in at least the 5, 6, 7, or 8 teams left behind, they are probably not going to win the national title anyhow. Yeah, he says if you're 9th or worse, then your chance to win the title probably not very good as it is. So this is an example where normally I'm kind of a traditionalist and I don't like a lot of change, but in the case of the playoff, it's still new enough right now that kind of figuring out how it works best is still kind of an appropriate discussion. And as Jerry said, when you add that 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th team, I do believe you're adding, in some cases, teams that would be capable of winning the national championship. This is always the thing that people mistakenly say, well, when you have these blowout semifinal games, well, this just proves you don't need playoff expansion. And I would say in most cases that's an oversimplification of the argument in a way that misunderstands the argument. When you have blowouts in the semifinal, it doesn't mean that we're not 4 playoff teams deserving. What it means oftentimes is maybe you just chose the wrong 4 teams, and that's why I want to take power away from the committee. My perfect scenario would be the 18 playoff, 5 of which would be teams that basically automatically qualified. I'll put all 5 Power 5 conference champions in there as a way of keeping the committee from having to make a lot of decisions, but then I would love to have those next 3 teams be at-large teams that earn their way in on the basis of what they do during the season, win games against a tough schedule, preferably. if you have to sacrifice and, put the group of 5 team in because you can't get the votes for the expansion, if you don't, then you just sort of deal with that and move on. But I can't stress this enough. For the real college football fan, the kind of people that we're talking about here, you, me, all of us, there's just no appetite whatsoever of, how does Southern Miss play their way into the college football playoff? This is something that the media does all the time, and there's a reason the media does it, and I won't necessarily bore you with it. But the media loves to talk all this group of 5 stuff up. I mean, the short version of it is that's where a lot of their sources come from. The media in some cases, I'm talking about the big national media type people, take care of sources as a way of hopefully extracting more information from them. And a lot of those sources are at that group of 5 level. So therefore, there's always going to be a lot of talk about, just anything related to the group of 5 because they want to scratch the back of those people down there. And so that's why there's always this huge imbalance of how much the media talks about the group of 5 compared to how much the actual fan talks about the group of 5, which is almost never. There's just, even the schools themselves have no fans to speak of. If you went to the average, group of 5 game, the stadium is basically empty. They don't have fans, but they have plenty of attention from the media. Lucy Bowers-Boykin says the committee will always find a way to manipulate with rankings during the season. I mean, I understand where Lucy's coming from on that, but I think the manipulation that you find is that they want college football to be a national sport. And so this to me seems like a reasonable compromise. Okay, it can be a national sport. You can bring in your, non-deserving conference champion from Pac-12, Big 12, whatever else, but can we at least then get the remaining teams, those at-large teams in from the very best, league, the SEC? Or, in some cases, look, the Big Ten East is a very deep division in normal years. Last year was a little bit of an unusual year, but it would not only be the SEC that benefited from the let's make room for playoff expansion. There are going to be plenty of years in which a Big Ten, type situation. I know a lot of you don't like the Big Ten, but honesty compels me to admit that, especially in the Big Ten East, a much deeper division than its counterpart on the other side, there are going to be years in which that second Big Ten team is seemingly worthy there as well. So it won't always be the SEC that benefits from this, but there's at least another SEC team each and every year that's worthy of consideration, and maybe this would be a way to get more of that. Randy Hall says Power 5 champs plus 3 is the perfect scenario. So a lot of us seem to be in kind of agreement on this. All right, I'll come back to Facebook in a moment. Let me go over to YouTube here and take care of some folks over there, kind of find out how everybody's doing on the YouTube side of things. All right, let's see. Here we go. String Gene says forget conference winners, take the top 8 or the top 12. So in a perfect world, String Gene, I'd be absolutely in favor of doing what you described there. But the problem is the committee just can't do it. They're just not capable of doing it. They don't have I don't even know what. Sometimes in life when you see these failing institutions, it's sort of hard to know if they're failing because of incompetence or if they're failing because of corruption. And frankly, incompetence is always a better explanation than corruption. But the committee is just not capable for whatever reason. They're not capable of picking the 8 best teams. So therefore, I would say let's take the power away from them and only ask them to pick 3 teams once they've already put the 5 conference champions in. And then if they can't do that, then all hope is lost. But I would love to live in String Gene, the world that he just described there, where we don't have to worry about these special designations or things like that. We can truly just have a conversation about the 8 most deserving teams. I'd love to do that, but the committee's proven they're just not capable of handling that. So therefore, you rubber stamp 5 teams, or if you have to do a 6th because of the group of 5, then rubber stamp that, and then pick you a couple of at-larges. It doesn't take much at-large. I'd love for it to be 3, but even if it's 2, those 2 at-large teams really spice up the playoff. They make those. They're going to win quarterfinal games more often than not. They just are. In fact, you put the second best team against the very best Pac-12 team. In most years, the SEC team is going to be favored in that game, probably going to win it. So that makes the semifinal games now better, and I think it keeps the interest in the regular season kind of where it needs to be there too. DMart42 says rap sheet's usually pretty reliable, referencing the Mac Jones thing. Yeah, the Mac Jones, Trey Lance deal there at number 3 is everything here. which I don't want to do too much Falcons talk because not everybody who watches is a Falcons fan. But now Atlanta gets to do whatever it wants. It can draft quarterback. It can draft, playmaking, pass catcher, receiver, tight end, whatever else. It can literally do anything it wants to do there at that number 4 spot. I've been very clear. I would take Justin Fields if I was the Falcons at 4. Frankly, I'd take Fields over Mac Jones and Trey Lance. I don't mind Zach Wilson over Fields because I thought he was good this year, and it seemed like his pro day was really pretty impressive too. Trevor Lawrence, I don't have an argument against that either. But when it comes to the Mac Jones, Trey Lance discussion, I mean, listen, I'm wrong plenty. We're all wrong when it comes to this draft stuff. It's a very inexact science, but I'm just telling you. I would absolutely take Fields over those guys there. I just would. Let's see what else. Jordan Bowman says Clemson and Notre Dame conspired before the season to get 2 ACC teams in. Yeah, I mean, I've said this before that when you watch the way the ACC did this past year where, it seemed like they were very interested in setting up a scenario that kind of protected, Clemson and Notre Dame. And even at the end of the season, didn't they basically – I have to remember what happened, but they essentially went ahead and kind of rubber stamped Clemson and Notre Dame into the playoff and into the into the ACC championship game without having to basically play the rest of their season. That's clearly the outcome they wanted, and they kind of moved that along so that was able to occur. They clearly manipulated that system to get those 2 teams in the playoff, and maybe it was a smart thing to do, but that clearly seemed to be what happened there. P. Rich says that he completely disagrees. He says, I'm taking Fields over every quarterback except Lawrence. So I guess he completely disagrees about Zach Wilson. The one thing I would say is, I'm not telling you I'm in love with Zach Wilson. I don't have a problem with a team, drafting him ahead of Fields. The one thing I would not have done if I was the Falcons, though, is, I guess, trade up to get him. That was one of the things that Mel Kiper at one point in time was talking about. I wouldn't trade up to get Zach Wilson, but if the Jets want to take Wilson over Fields, I don't have a problem with them doing that. But in terms of your belief that you think Fields is going to be better than Wilson, you may very well be right about that. Robert Barnes says, have the committee be made up of coaches, retired coaches, and sports writers. Yeah. So the one conspiracy theory I'm absolutely a believer in is that the only people on the playoff selection committee that have any real power to pick the teams in the playoff are the athletic directors. That all of the non-athletic directors, whether it be former coach or dignitary, like Condoleezza Rice was once on there, or, former player I think you have had a sports writer on the committee before. Those people are just window dressing. That there's never going to be more of them than there are athletic directors, and they are never going to have any real power as a way of moving against what the athletic directors want to do. I used to be a big fan of the TV show Mad Men. If you guys are familiar with that, it was on AMC for a long time. And the main character of Mad Men was a guy named Don Draper. And it's like a series that takes place in corporate world of the 1960s. And one of the things that Don Draper talked about one time is that there's a meeting, and there's also a meeting before the meeting. And I've always been a big proponent that the actual decisions of the playoff committee aren't decided in the meeting. That's the thing you see on TV, Grapevine, Texas. The actual decisions of the playoff selection committee are done in the meeting before the meeting. And the only people who are in that meeting are the athletic directors. The athletic directors are the ones that make the actual decision for who the playoff is, and the other people are just kind of in the room to make it look good. And it's kind of a prestigious thing to be a part of, so they don't really complain. They just kind of go along with whatever the consensus is, I'm sure, in most cases. But even if they didn't, if they wanted to be kind of an activist voice on the other side, they'd just be simply ignored. The athletic directors make that choice. And, it's all about what they think is going to make them more money. That's my one conspiracy about the playoff selection committee. HR picking stuff, going back to the Dan Lanning topic, says Dan the man Lanning, pay the man his money. So there you go on that. DMart42 does not like Robert Barnes' idea of keeping the writers in the discussion. He says not a lot of hard J journalists out there anymore. I don't know if it's the big J journalists that I want making this decision. In fact, I guess, I guess it leads to an interesting discussion of, if you really did want the 8 best teams in the playoff, what group of people do you most want in discussion? Do you want? Because, former coaches are just as biased as anything, and some of them aren't exactly paying the most attention on some of this kind of stuff as it is. What is the group of people that you most want? Half the time I'm sort of content to believe I could just walk into a bar and pull 4 guys off a stool and say, hey, who do you think the best teams in the country are? And I sort of feel like I'd get as good an answer from them as I would from anybody sometimes. All right, couple more and we're going to go because I got to run today. Let's see what else is going on. Randy Hall likes Branson Robinson. He's a good-looking player for sure. Steve Highland says, in baseball, the writers voting for the Hall of Fame is a joke. Murph is a Hall of Fame player. Yeah. This is one of those where, I'm not, completely anti-sports writer necessarily, but certainly sports writers have beclowned themselves as a, group over and over again with some of their baseball Hall of Fame votes. I can certainly agree with you on that. Let's see what else. Calvin Sanders wants to drop Vanderbilt and Tennessee out of the SEC. Isaac Cruz thought I was spending too much time on Facebook. I have tried to bounce around here a little bit, though. Matt Rukavina says, if we move to an 8-team format, it may almost do you the service to avoid the SEC championship game. That's an interesting argument. However, Matt, maybe knowing that it's it's an automatic qualifier into the playoff, maybe that provides enough incentive for you to want to play in it. Because, listen, if there's only a couple of at-large spots available, even if they're worth 3, in most years, it's not going to be. People overuse the idea of, they've already clinched the college football playoff. The committee is just kind of weird. I would hate to know I was leaving my fate up to the hands of the committee. So I get what you're saying, that playing that extra game, especially against a grueling opponent, could seem like a negative thing. Alabama in 2017 seems to be an example to kind of prove that point. Heck, Alabama in 2011 seems like a pretty, fair argument in favor of that. But if it was truly an automatic qualifier situation where you won the SEC championship game and you were guaranteed a playoff spot, I'm hoping that might be the incentive you need to make that game still matter. Pete Williams very happy with Kirby Smart's recruiting success. Jesse Saga says, if you pull me off a bar stool, we got a problem, BA. I understand that there as well, Jesse. That's pretty good. Oren Chile says they have to figure out what to do with the bowls. And yeah, this is one of those things where I don't have time to, fully get into all this today, but one of the things I'd love to see college football kind of move back to, and this is not just how media covers the sport, this is how fans respond to the sport. I think we've got to on this show with this program, Georgia, we're obviously going to obsess over the idea of a national championship because that's Georgia's next step, right? And Georgia's been trying to work to get there. And so there's a reason on a show like this, we're kind of national championship obsessed because Georgia's, fairly in that conversation. But for most of the rest of the sport, they don't have any shot at all of winning the national championship. And so we've got to try to find a way to talk about bowl games in a way that makes them feel like they matter again, and rivalry games in a way that makes them feel like they matter again, and just sort of the basic traditions of the sport. This used to be really kind of important. It's one of the reasons why college football was, I think, for a long time, content not to have much of a national championship structure because it had so much else going for it. And now you've got a more sensible national championship picture, but some of the other stuff that used to matter doesn't seem to quite matter as much. We've got to try to find a way to get some of that back again. And as I said before, this is not just what media chooses to promote. This is kind of fans themselves. I'm not going to lie to you. One of the things that makes me a little bit, I don't want to say sad, that's too strong of a word, but concerned is on a game day Saturday when you just sort of get the sense that a lot of Georgia fans could just sort of take it or leave it. They don't view Tennessee as a big game anymore, even though Georgia and Tennessee have this long history with each other. South Carolina kind of the same way. In most years, Georgia fans just kind of shrug it off. It seems inconsequential. In terms of the highest level of attention, there are only a few games from Georgia fans that really get that. And I don't know. We got to try to find a way to I mean, like the Auburn game is, for instance, it seems like even a rivalry game like that doesn't matter the way that it once did in this kind of current world in which we live. And we got to try to find a way to get some of that back a little bit. Make the sport about more than just making the college football playoff. There is to kind of be in the role that I am, doing this for a living and kind of seeing the way that people respond to, certain things. We got to find a way to kind of get more interest in stuff beyond just the, are you in the playoff or not? All right, we're getting ready to go. Josh Grafton on the subject of, Matt Ryan, then transition to Justin Fields. I'd be very fine with that. Be very fine with all of that. A lot of Fields talk in the comment section right now on the YouTube side of thing. He's a fascinating player in this draft. Fascinating player. You wonder if this is all a smokescreen. Maybe San Francisco does take him at 3. I don't know. It's one of the reasons why the draft is such good TV, though. I mean, it's pretty obvious. All right, let's get ready to go. DMart42 in the way that talking about the Matt Ryan the Matt Ryan contract situation. I mean, I think there's no doubt, even if Atlanta drafts a quarterback right now, the plan would be to play Ryan as the starter in 2021, which is, potentially a luxury for that person that potentially comes behind Matt Ryan. So that's obviously something to kind of pay attention to. It's going to be good TV with the draft on Thursday, no question about that. Hey, hopefully we've entertained you as well here today on our program. R.S. Andrews Cool Down, thank you for being a part of it. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric, you can trust R.S. Andrews to do all that for you. They show up on time, do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. Find them online, rsandrews.com. We got to go. Have a great day. See you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Look forward to talking to you then, everybody.